Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War See You Later Satyr event in which the Argos is added to the game. So let's get into that. As far as the troop itself, does come in with a bunch of green and yellow arcane trade stones, pretty cheap, so you can end up stocking up on them if you need. As far as the troop itself, it is pretty useless. It is basically just a really bad mana generator. It gets to choose a color, then it removes gems of that color, not destroyed, is simply removed, which means you do not get the mana for it, and then dispels the first enemy, which was to get rid of any of the positive status effects they have, and drains their mana by the number of gems removed. So if you only remove something like 8 gems, it would only drain 8 mana. So overall, pretty inferior compared to things that can full mana drain for less than that, plus target whatever they want instead of being forced to hit first slot. It does have the uniqueness of having dispel on top of that. However, that is not good enough to justify ever bothering to use this guy. And he doesn't have like empower or something, which you'd kind of expect with like ability like that. But nope, nothing really of value. So overall, it's just going to be useless and pretty much never used, as a lot of new glory troops end up being. But anyways, as far as event key drop table, don't forget, if you haven't been, you can end up getting 10 glory keys every single week for essentially free for how little bit they are. It's 10 event keys for 180 glory each. Pretty cheap for getting these event keys. So basically, as far as the event key drop table this week, we got ourselves everything in Vale. There are mostly 2 things that are noteworthy about this, and it is basically the 2 mythics, the Wild Queen and Pan. This is actually the first time Pan has been in the event key drop table. He came out a couple months ago, and this is, well, the first time he's been around since, other than Soulforge and such. But if you haven't picked him up then, you'll be able to do so now if you want, and try to take the chance. It'll be half and half between Wild Queen and that. Wild Queen's a pretty good pickup for running for green, purple, and brown Guild War Day. Works really well for all 3 of them, so definitely worth considering. As far as most rest of the drop table, it's pretty average, nothing really too outstanding from Vale. A couple like okay utility troops here and there, like King Selena's for 50% mana start to all wild folk. Some of the better troops as well for the kingdom are actually from the faction and not specifically in the event key drop table. As far as the event key drop table, every single thing you see here is available except for the 4 troops that say the Warrens, of which of course they are from the Warrens, with Luna being the most noteworthy one of that group. But overall, if you're bothering to use event keys here, mostly hunting for mythics. Otherwise, you probably don't want to waste your event keys this week, and probably just hold on to them. So that's pretty much it. And maybe Funessa. Funessa does have an empower into a life gain, which can be pretty useful for this event as well, and is also just a okay damage source as far as an empower that can actually upscale through various events. So potentially worth considering as well. But overall, nothing really too special unless you're going for the super high rarity things that are within the drop table. Anyways, as far as the World Law event this week, it's basically rarity order, so yay, nice and straightforward. As far as your restriction, it is a Pan's Vale restriction. So you can use absolutely anything from Pan's Vale as well as Pan's Vale weapons, which you do have a few pretty noteworthy ones as far as weapons are concerned. The main ones that are going to be pretty useful are the 2 Wild Folk related ones. Well, one is Wild Folk, the other one is Pan's Vale, and the other one being Yasmin's Pride. So you can actually use this for a gigantic life gain. I don't personally feel like it'll be as good for this event compared to some of the other ones. But yeah, Yasmin's Pride is within the Soulforge this week. It is an insanely good weapon, actually probably top 10 in the game. Well, you don't use it for every situation, and this event probably being one of those that you don't. It is definitely a really solid pickup to consider getting, as all these are in Soulforge, or most of these are in Soulforge this week. One other thing to potentially consider too, while very situational, is also going to be Orpheus's loot. Pretty easy to get off of 250 wins off the Bard Hero class from the Kingdom, which also has the event this Thursday, and ends up doing a cleanse and enchant to all other allies. The enchant being particularly noteworthy because you can end up feeding them up in several turns and just kind of get their mana up passively if you want to kind of go down that route. Otherwise, you're mostly just going to be using one of the double mana generators and just using that as your primary means of getting your mana going. We also did end up getting a new weapon. We actually have a new weapon today and a new weapon coming in on Friday. All you have to do for that is just go up to tier 4, which is the normal 500 gems through this event. And I forgot how much it is on the weekend one. I think it's closer to 250. It's a little bit more pricier on this one, though probably still worth going for in order to get the weapon. This weapon is pretty useless though overall. The one this Friday is going to be pretty good. It's going to be a mech related one. As far as this weapon, it just gets to choose a color, removes all the gems of that color, and then deals damage, some scatter damage at a really small boost ratio. Overall, you're not really going to be bothering with this thing, and yeah, it's pretty underwhelming. Pretty underwhelming. I don't think it got any decent perks either, but we'll go double check just in case. I don't believe it did though, but we'll go to upgradable. Oh, I didn't upgrade this other guy as well. Might as well. We're already here. Might as well. Where'd the other guy go? We're not here for you. Where it is? There it is. Okay, did you gain anything useful? Enchant self? That's okay. Yeah, it didn't get anything useful. Unfortunate, it's just useless, which is kind of to be expected. But that is that. Anyways, as far as other stuff that we got going on this week, Laraza's Lair is tomorrow. This is a very, very ridiculously annoying level 500 pure faction. So if you want to get it out of the way, well, you have it around tomorrow, or you could just keep ignoring it forever, or almost forever, and just kind of save it for last. It is probably the top 3 most annoying ones, mostly because all 4 of the troops that you would end up using there all have a random aspect to them that makes them extremely inconsistent to use. So yeah, it is like very exceedingly luck-based. For Wednesday, we actually have the Australian Day pet, so that's just a cosmetic pet that's going to be coming in. Thursday, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Bard pet. The Bard class event, And on Friday, we're going to be having the Invasion event, which is also going to be bringing in a very good mech weapon. And this is actually somewhat relevant because the next mythic as well that's coming 2 Fridays from now is going to be a mech. So basically, we're getting a mech weapon this Friday and then a mech mythic the following Friday in the standard Glory Gem Guild VIP chest as the standard monthly mythic that's going to be coming in. So yeah, we're going to be getting double mechs back to back in a sense. So going to be kind of good in that regard. Weapon actually synergizes pretty well with it too, so definitely make sure to pick up that. Anyways, as far as Soulforge this week, there are a couple things worth getting here. The most noteworthy thing as far as troops are Infernus and Divine Ishbala. Oddly enough, they actually work together as well. Divine Ishbala, such a strong 50% mana start troop that she was actually nerfed to 40% mana start. So she's actually the only 50% mana start troop that gives all to a type that had to be nerfed ever. So that is how strong she is. Her ability itself is already pretty good, being able to feed mana not only back into itself, but also having a really strong skull spam and a double enchant, so it gains a ton of mana. And yeah, it also gets to mana start all divines, which helps them get rolling. And while it's not as strong as the 50% she used to have, it is still usable enough that you tend to use it with like Divine Ishbala Quillen team, which is still extremely meta. It's normally used with Rope Dart, and it can be used with pretty much any hefty yellow team, like Gorgoltha Front, or however you kind of want to position it. It's normally used with at least one additional yellow because she will normally have mana excess as far as yellow is concerned, so you normally want to have at least one other yellow synergy with her, depending on what you end up using for it. Quillen, Rope Dart, Gorgoltha, whatever you end up choosing. There's quite a few options that end up synergizing with it, most of which are also divine that you would end up doing. Not all of them, though, but a good number of them. Other than that, Infernus. Infernus, while not as good later in the game these days, it is still the best burner in the entire game and still really good in early to mid game. Not only does it get to do 3 damage to all enemies per turn for a total of essentially 12 damage per turn, but it also has a nice mix of pretty much everything. It's really well rounded. It has a storm into its own color, a red storm into its red coloration. It gets some board clear, it gets some mana accumulation, it gets some damage that can't be countered by submerge, and just overall a nice little mix of everything. Still a nice, really well balanced, good mythic, worth potentially getting, especially if you're earlier on in the game and you're looking for like some mythic to get as one of your first few, aside from definitely wanting to get something like Iron Gut first. But Infernus is still pretty good early game to mid game pickup, though he does fall off pretty much increasingly in late game in the current state of the game. But he's still pretty good as you're progressing through the game, and so much so that he's probably even just worth getting just for that purpose if you're still at that point. Anyways, aside from that, as I mentioned earlier, Yasmin's Pride, probably the main thing you want to pick up. Yasmin's Pride, not that useful for much this week. However, it is pretty much one of the top 10 best weapons in the game. Unlike most of the top 10 weapons in the game, this is actually an extremely defensive option rather than offensive. It gets to eliminate all armor from an enemy, which is offensive. However, it just gives a bunch of life to your allies. However, this life is boost ratioed based on the armor torn. So if they had something like 300 life when you're fighting a really high battle, you're basically giving, 300 armor, you're basically getting 100 life to every single one of your allies, plus whatever its base value is, in this case 42. This is particularly good with things that have an HP boost ratio. Most notably, it is used with Ketris the Bull. However, it can be used with any troop in the entire game that has a strong HP boost ratio. And not only does this make your team harder to kill, but of course, if you have an HP boost ratio on your team, you'll end up doing more damage as well. It is commonly used pretty much exclusively for invasions and Tower of Doom. However, it can be used in a few other instances, but those tend to be the most common placed areas, as they're the areas that it tends to fend out the best. Definitely worth considering. Aside from that, the only other weapons you might want to pick up are something like the glaive of the goats, kind of just for the synergy with the event. So maybe just kind of a weapon to pick up for the Ward Lore event if you want this week. It's not necessarily required. You could easily just go with the class weapon if you truly had to. I think I even ended up building a team around one of the class weapons just to be cheaper. So you don't necessarily need to go out of your way. If you're going to go out of your way for any weapon this week, it is definitely going to be Yasmin's Pride. So make sure to do that if you have the resources for it. Anyways, let's go grab our tribute real quick and then go show a bunch of teams. How much right now? Nice solid 19. So as far as some teams, of course, as per usual, all of the teams mentioned here will be in the description below if you just want to go and copy paste any of them. So for our very first team, this is most likely what I'll be running for the Ward Lore event, the Glaive of Many Goats, which ends up boost ratioing off of Wild Folk, which is our entire team since we're using Bard Hero class, since all 4 of them do count as Wild Folk. It also ends up creating a bunch of green and yellow, which all feeds into Luna. Luna's just going to be doing a bunch of full AoE damage. Can get some other additional status effects for yourself or for the enemy, or negative ones for the enemy. Has some extra explosion whenever you take yellow too, which you're generally going to be doing quite a bit of. And you also get extra stats to yellows per turn. Aside from that, King Salinas gets to start all of it with 50%, since the entire team, of course, is Wild Folk. As far as the other team, this is the weapon thing I was talking about earlier. You get this from 250 wins on Bard Hero class. So if you don't want to go out of your way to get a weapon, you can simply get this one for free. All you have to do is get 250 wins on Bard if you haven't already. Not the greatest weapons out there. However, it does have a 3 enchant to all the other allies while giving a life gain to itself. This ends up working out pretty well for Vanessa, since it has a relatively low mana cost, and you just get to do a bunch of damage, gain a bunch of life, and just kind of go from there and spam with extra turns. This scales pretty well once enemies get higher stats, as it will keep increasing its damage based on whatever its attack is. Aside from that, as far as the Loraza's Lair event, it is really heavy on yellow for both the first and final battle, so it is a good idea to just spam a bunch of finesses, as they will basically tear all the way through 20 to 500. You can do pretty much any weapon with it, though, of course, Nimbus Bow being the better one. And you can end up just doing it with Stormcaller, of course, as you need the Yellow Storm for finesse, as well as to feed mana into the finesse, so they can do extra damage and get all the mana looping. As far as the actual team that you would end up using, it is extremely luck-based, because all these are either or between a bunch of different things. Same as the Chaos Hound, and same as Loraza herself, and the other one you don't really use because it doesn't really synergize that well. But basically, the whole premise of if you're going to be running Pure Faction for this place is you try to disable out the enemy, get them down to 0 attack, get them silenced, get them mana drained, basically keep disabling them as much as you can with the Dementicores, and then you go and basically kill with the rest of your team. That is essentially the whole entire premise of this place, is completely disable them until they can't do anything, and then slowly chip them down. That's basically what you have to do for every single battle until you eventually get lucky enough to win. And hopefully you will get eventually lucky enough to win, because gosh, is that place annoying. Anyways, as far as Catches the Bull, or should say Yasmin's Pride, this is one of several teams that you can end up building around Yasmin's Pride. I figured I show at least one of them, since it is one of the better weapons in the game. So this is obviously built for something like a green Tower of Doom or for a green Delve. Do not use this for green Guild War, though, as the teams that you would use for that are a bit different than the teams that you would use for Delves and such. This is meant more so for upscaling kind of areas, so like the later end of Tower of Doom, the later end of Delves, and so forth. Generally, this is ran with double Catches the Bull. However, of course, this one is made to only use one, and you can use Tulio for the additional mana. Tulio, really good mana accumulator, actually. Ends up enchanting all of the allies of the color that ends up choosing, so you could just do green. You basically get a bunch of mana for your green, you get an enchant on all your greens, and you're pretty much good to go. Leprechaun obviously does its normal explosion, Catches the Bull with its HP boost ratio, among other boost ratios, but obviously HP is the main thing you're going to be boosting off of, and then you just kind of get all the armor, or all the HP off of Yasmin's Pride, basically become unkillable while Ketris destroys everything. It is a single damage source kind of team, so you do have to be careful, because if Ketris dies, you're kind of out of luck, though generally third slot is the safest slot on your team, and in the context of Delves and Tower of Doom, very few things will actually really be hitting anything in that location, so more often than not, it's going to be relatively safe. So overall, works out pretty well. And of course, you can run double Ketris if you happen to have double Ketris. And aside from that, Bard class event, pretty similar restriction to the event currently. For the World Lore event, the only additional restriction would be the fact that you have to specifically be using Wild Folk. So you could just go 3 Wild Folk from Pan's Vale and just do it with a Dawnbringer. And in this case, we just went with Finessa, very similar to the other team actually, but obviously more geared towards just quick killing the class event. And that's for this Thursday. But anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for this video. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. We'll be streaming tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as we do every single night. Tonight, of course, going over all of the chapter tasks. And we'll be doing that. We don't get any kind of interesting rewards, but in a couple of weeks, we'll be getting the sun, as well as whatever the unique thing is for the season, as well as, of course, the mythic itself. And I did get the bigger pass, so we will be able to go over that kind of stuff a whole week earlier. So that'll be nice, so we can kind of get the video out a little bit earlier, and still go over it the week of course, too. But we'll go from there. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to leave a like on the video, helps out a lot, and I will catch you all later. Hope you all have a wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone.